As we continue our study of the book of Exodus, we come to what is really one of the very high points of the entire book. I would say the deliverance at the sea and the deliverance with the 10th plague, the plague of the Passover, and of course the making of the covenant at Mount Sinai would be in many ways the three high points of the story. And the one that we have today is actually in many ways a kind of a paradigm, a kind of a picture that is used by the Israelites all through their history as they, first of all, look at what God did and then reflect on that as they hope that God will act for them in the future. We study Exodus 13, verse 17 through 15, verse 21, the beginning of the deliverance at the Sea of Reeds, as it's called in Hebrew, the Yam Suf, and then the song that is sung by Moses and by Miriam to celebrate that victory. We note that, first of all, in chapter 13, verses 17 through 22, that Joseph's bones are being taken along. This is picking up on that ancient idea that there would be a return to the land. It has always puzzled me, and there is, of course, no answer to it. Why in the world didn't they go and take Joseph back and bury him in the land of Canaan as they had taken Jacob back? There would seem to be no reason why, if he was at the high point of his career when he would have died, that he wouldn't have been taken back before there were pharaohs who rose who didn't know him. But the text says nothing about that, and so these many generations later, however many that were, those generations were, they take the bones, and it's not really mentioned much more in the story, but at least the event is mentioned. We're told then that the people were not going to go right up into the land of the Philistines. The Gaza Strip, as it's called today, would have been that area in the very southwestern part of Israel. And partially it's because it says if they had to get into a battle right away, then they might be afraid and they might turn back. Though we will see that soon after they leave, after having watched Pharaoh and his hosts washed away and drowned, that they will get into a battle anyway against people known as the Amalekites, who are actually distant relatives of them. So we're told, though, that there is this pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. And we might remember this when we look at the story of the Transfiguration, or the story of the ascension of Jesus, or when the Temple of Solomon gets dedicated and the temple or the tabernacle, where that cloud comes down. A cloud is not simply the kind of white puffy cloud that we see in the sky. It is symbolic of what's hiding the presence of God behind it. And thus this is the presence of God which is there, and a little bit later the text will mention that the angel of God is behind them, between them and Egypt, and that the pillar goes to lead them. So God's symbolically present with them. We don't know exactly what kind of cloud it looks like, and it's usually kind of an odd picture when they draw it. You never quite know exactly whether that's anything close to the way it looks. But as we get into chapter 14 then, we find that they've kind of doubled back to a place called Pir Hahirot. One of the things to note in the last, I think probably about 20 or 25 years now, since I believe the 1973 Mideast War, when much of the land of the Sinai was taken before some of it was given back, there has been a lot of archaeological excavation. There are no permanent settlements anywhere in the Sinai. Nobody really knows exactly where Mount Sinai was, but the traditional place is down at the very southern tip of a triangular-shaped piece of land, and that's visible in the materials that are provided. But these cities that are mentioned are also probably more just kind of caravan stations or something like that. We know very little about it, and they have found some evidence of settlements, but not anything that would be permanent. There is a little bit of rainfall that falls in this region, and where the water runs down, then that would form kind of deep clefts that are known as wadis, or arroyos as they're known in our country. But in terms of permanent settlements, nothing like that has been found. Certainly nothing where they've got the name of the place. Very rarely, even in archaeology in general, do they find from this time period that a place name will be mentioned that says this is where we are. And so a lot of this is guesswork, and they can make some more educated guesses now than they could even 25 years ago because of the work of a few archaeologists who have spent really a good bit of the last couple of decades studying the area and finding the little bit of remains that they can. So if the maps say we don't know exactly where this is or that is, it for some reason there were some settlements there that had names that they're identified by, but nothing that we would be able to identify now. Once again, we come to this very difficult idea that God says he is hardening the heart of Pharaoh, and later it'll say that he's hardening the heart of the people as well. Once again, just very briefly, this is troublesome to us. There is much in this chapter that can be very troublesome to us when we remember that God is the Lord over all of life, and that, as many other parts of the Bible will say, particularly our New Testament, that he died for all. And yet here we are with the struggle to explain why could God go and punish some of those whom he actually made as well. Remember, Egyptians are also human beings, descendants of Adam and Eve, descendants of Noah and his family, and thus are also part of the creation. So the story is told from a kind of an inside point of view, and really causes a lot of difficulty for people who will say, how can God be such a punishing God? I'm not sure that I can give any better answer than anyone else can on it, because God says some things I will reveal and some things I won't. But what we do know is that the hardening is something that is within the mind or the heart of God. It almost seems more that it is going to bring out what's there. At least that's the way that I understand it the best. That God is not saying, I'm going to take someone who would love me dearly, and I'm going to make sure they hate me. And I'm going to make sure that I twist everything around in their heart until all they can do is be against me. The best we can understand is in light of the fall and the sin, when Adam and Eve are hiding in the garden, when God comes looking for them, and the fact that God has to go seek others out that they can't find him, Abraham and Jacob and others, that the natural reaction of human beings when God comes close is to either go hide or to fight back. And this would mean then that as God says, I'm going to really show what's in his heart, we could either say that Pharaoh hardened his heart or that God hardened his heart. Really, the coming activity of God is going to bring that on. If you've watched any of these police videos where they show true-to-life videos, it always amazes me with the respect or fear that I would have of a policeman who would pull me over for speeding or something like that, how so many of the people who are pulled over are mouthing off and just really being very nasty to those cops who are pulling them over. And it's almost like when somebody says, I'm going to take your freedom away, that then a person might say, I'm going to take my chances and I'm going to yell as much as I want to. And sometimes even there'll be this charge of resisting arrest. But as God comes here, he is saying to Pharaoh and his army, I'm going to let these people go, and I'm not going to let you chase after them. So it really removes the threat from behind them. They will have the threat of the Philistines and the other Canaanites who live in the land up in front of them. Much like when Jacob fled from his uncle Laban, God removed the threat by saying to Laban, you leave him alone. Now Laban listened. Pharaoh, because he is getting the benefit of all of these Israelites, all these children of Jacob, Pharaoh didn't. Laban says, I have a right. If I want to, I can take my family back. And here Pharaoh as well could have said, I have the power at least to be able to take them back. So it kind of just eats away at him more and more and more. But let's recognize that God is not one whom we can understand completely. And some of these things are just very difficult for all of us. In the next section in chapter 14, verses 5 to 9, then we see this section where the picked chariots, the 600 picked chariots, or the crack forces of Pharaoh are mustered together, along with all the other chariots as well. And it says that they are caught then as they kind of turned back by a place called Baal Zephon. The word Baal is the name for the deity who was seen to be the storm god, and Zephon is the word for the north. So it's an odd kind of a name. The city is Baal from the north, not a name of a deity that you would find in the list of all the Egyptian gods. But here's a city where apparently some people from Syria or Lebanon from up farther in the north might have been located, and that's where they come back, and then they're caught in this region. The notes will tell us that we're not sure exactly where this Sea of Reeds was, that the Great and Little Bitter Lakes are possible sites for it. It's been a real confusion of why this isn't the Red Sea, and if you look at a map, you will see that the Red Sea is considerably farther down, and a very, very big, big body of water. You have the Gulf of Suez that comes to the northwest by the Sinai Peninsula, and the Gulf of Aqaba that goes to the northeast, but then down below it is the sea itself. And even if we took the Gulf of Suez and saw them going that far and crossing it, that would still be a very, very considerable distance south that they would have gone, and this doesn't seem to suggest that. So again, why did it get translated that way? Why is it read that way? If you would look in the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it's called the Red Sea. Now that Greek translation is done about 250 years before the time of Christ, but at least 1,000 years after this time. By then, the Yam Suf, even though the translators are living in Egypt, the papyrus marshes, which is what that really means, would not have been seen as the place of the crossing. So the translators actually took a name of what they thought it would have been, and they translated it that way. But the original Hebrew doesn't read that way at all. And we all know the story that it's at the Red Sea. Geographically, it does not seem that that is the location. You don't need much water, though, if you're going to drown Pharaoh and his host. All you need is enough to stop them from their progress, and it doesn't take much water to do that. So we may never know the exact location. The central event is that God is there and that he is doing something. In chapter 14, verses 10 to 14, then, we find one little hint again, like we've had very early in the book, about the Israelites complaining to Moses. They never seem to be settled. Every little thing just causes them more grief, and now they're saying, didn't we have graves in Egypt? Couldn't we have been buried back there? Why in the world did you bring us out here so that Pharaoh and his host could kill us? Why did you wheel us around and blockade us so that we're actually caught between this water and Pharaoh's host? Again and again, they show that their hearts are hard as well. But what God will do is he will act in grace toward them, and they will come up a little bit, and they will be able to say, we believe, we've seen God acting. Here at least, you're going to see some of that take place. But Moses' response is simply, stand firm, and the Lord will fight. Now this is what's called holy war, or God's war. It is something that is going to appear again with these Amalekites, for example. It's going to appear as Israel goes into the land of promise. It will appear all the way through Israel's history when the people say, where is our God and how will he give us salvation? This event right here, probably even more than the plague of the firstborn, where the Israelites were in their own homes, this plague was was a direct battle. And God is going to cause panic. And God is going to be fighting for his people. If we want to stand back and ask if God is fair, this story is not going to help us know it. But if we look at the promises to Abraham, those who bless you, I'll bless. Those who curse you, I will curse. I will bring their curses back on their own head. And now God shows what he has done. As the people back into the future, this is as close as we can get to an Easter type of event. Now, it's not Easter. And those who would say that this is like Easter, all we can do is see here a little bit of a hint of it. because obviously with Easter, Jesus had to suffer and die and then rise. God had to act to hurt himself. Here it's simply some wind blowing, and one might say that God hurt as Pharaoh's and all the firstborn died, and then as Pharaoh and his host are wiped out. Certainly that would be a tragedy in the heart of God. But God didn't do that to himself as he does with the New Testament. And so this is kind of a window in to the heart of God, a window into the depth of humans not being able to defend themselves and deliver themselves. That certainly is very helpful to see here. But if we are going to look at whether or not they were actually on a par or on an equal level, then this event is not going to be on the same level. Thus, when we read in the Old Testament about that God is my salvation, we can't jump right away to say that the concept of that salvation meant for the people in explicit language that God was going to come and suffer and die on a cross. We talk about progressive revelation. They were in that relationship with God, but for them the word salvation would have been defined as deliverance from Egypt. Later, when they go into the land, they will be delivered as they take the city of Jericho and as they take some of the country. But then the tables will shift, and God will actually come against them. As they turn away from him, the day of the Lord, which this is the par excellence, this is the day that everyone would look back on, that day of the Lord, that some of the prophets talk about, would be a day when God would come at his own people as if they were like the Egyptians. And so much of the Old Testament is a real tragedy. It's a passion of God as he hurts because of what his people have done. And sometimes then he has to use armies or natural disasters against his own people. The idea, though, is that God is the one who will get the glory here, and that the people of Egypt are not going to be able to overcome what has taken place. And so in chapter 14, verses 15 to 19, then Moses stretches his hand out over the waters, and the waters, of course, part. And then all of the people are hardened in their hearts, the Egyptians, and they chase after them. And as they chase after them, then their wheels get stuck. It becomes either muddy or their wheels are clogged down, and then they begin to panic in verses 21 to 25, or actually 19 and 20, first of all, tell us about the angel of the Lord and the cloud, and then 21 to 25 talk about how that east wind came and then blew everything back again, water where it had come from, and as they get the wheels clogged, then they are in a panic. That's a very technical term, that they are gripped with this terrible panic, that somehow they are in the grip of one from whom they cannot escape. Chapter 14, verses 26 to 31, then tell us about how the water comes back and the people all die, and that God has indeed saved his people. Not through the Lord dying, but here the enemies of his people dying. Then the people believe. So they see that event. They had seen all these plagues, and yet they were now panicking themselves. Now it says they see once again, and they believe. And so God kind of draws out from them that trust that he has put in them, that he will be with them at all times. Chapter 15, verses 1 to 21, is really two songs. The first verses, most of it is a song of Moses, one of two songs of Moses. The other one is in Deuteronomy chapter 32 at the very end of the Torah. And then a very short song by Miriam, which the women sing as they celebrate with tambourine that God has saved all of his people. Now that song that Moses sings is a song that picks up some of these concepts that I've just been mentioning. First of all, that God has become their salvation. For them, salvation would have been deliverance from enemies you can see. I think in many ways this is kind of a type, kind of a picture that God gives us, so that when we try and reflect on what does it mean to be saved from eternal death, then we can look at these stories in the Old Testament and get some notion of panic that comes when somebody is in a situation they can't get out of, and we can see God delivering from Pharaoh's hosts, and then by implication we can say that's what happens to us as we're delivered from death, and eternal death, and from Satan, and from the bonds of this world, and from our old sinful nature which wishes for the flesh pots of Egypt, and we are delivered into that new life. We're also confronting here the concept that God is a warrior. Again, as I've mentioned, this is a very troublesome thing, that God would be fighting with some people against others. And if people want to say, I don't want to believe in a God who causes suffering, it's chapters like this that they might read in the Bible and then say, what kind of a God would this be? An early churchman by the name of Marcion, Marcion, actually took away all of the Old Testament and took away the Gospels of Matthew, I believe also the Gospel of John, left, I think, Luke and Acts and Paul's letters, and said the rest of the stories are about a God whom Jesus defeated. And the move to decide which books are in the New Testament and which books in the entire Scriptures was in response to that man who said, I can't have anything in terms of my sacred writings that would talk about a warrior God like this. And so the rebellion, or the reaction against that, was when they finally noted which books are part of the sacred Scriptures. Another term that comes in here is that God, with the blast of his nostrils, is able to win a victory, showing that God is also a God who is involved with nature. Most of the other gods were seen as nature gods. Here, God affects nature. He is not kind of caught up within it, so he's kind of above and beyond that. And one odd little note that you might pay attention to is it says that the people in the land of Canaan knew what had happened here, and that God brought them into that special land, almost as if the story of the song continues on beyond the time of Moses' life, because Moses never brought them all the way into the sanctuary and the holy place in Jerusalem. But those little events are noted there as well. Finally, we notice that there is a statement that no other gods would be as powerful as this. We're still in a realm where people think each nation has its gods and the other ones aren't powerful. And this text says, God's the powerful one, and the other gods are nothing. But it's not as if they say they don't exist. It just says they are not powerful at this point. So we get kind of the vocabulary of a certain time period that gets woven in, and later fuller interpretations of that will come. This section then shows us in a kind of a hidden way and yet a revealed way that God says, I can act to do whatever I need to for you whenever I need to do it. And you may not see me, but I am there. And of course the phrase of the mercy of God that comes here, the outpouring of God's love is there, and the question about is there any God like the Lord anywhere around, and the answer obviously is no. And salvation always results then in praise. We'll see that at other times in the Bible as well. So what we do is when we worship, we are praising God for what he has done and focusing on what has already taken place to decide how we can affect our future and plan our future out in light of what's already happened to all of us. We don't know what eternal life is going to be exactly, and the Israelites didn't know exactly what Canaan would be like. But we too get to look back not just on deliverance from Egypt, but deliverance in the death and resurrection of Jesus from our own sin, our own death. Remember that the Israelites weren't being punished by being down in Egypt. They had not done anything wrong to be there. But we are told that our inherited sin means that we are in trouble that we deserve to be in. And we're treated to the salvation anyway. So this kind of a picture here, we'll see that unfold in other places and times, but it really is the central story of deliverance for the Jewish people, and one that is quite different really from an idea that we are delivered from eternal death and able to live with God by grace forever and ever. Thank you, and I hope that this has helped you get even a better understanding of the way in which God works for us as well.